a year ago, June 1st, 2016, to be precise, there were some pretty major changes made to automobile insurance coverage. Joining us now from McLeish, Orlando, is personal injury lawyer Alison Burrison. And you were here to tell us all about it at the time. Welcome.
I was. Thank you for having me back.
So let's recap again for our listeners. What were the major changes that came about from Bill 15, fighting fraud and reducing automobile insurance rates?
Without a doubt, the major changes that came about from that bill were the significant reduction in benefits that were available to those that are seriously injured in car accidents. And when I talk about seriously injured, or I use the word catastrophically injured, I'm talking about people that suffer brain injuries, severe brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, amputations as a result of the accident that affect every aspect of their daily life. And the statistics on that really are only about 1% of Ontarians that are involved in auto accidents are really in what we call that catastrophic category. So what happened last year was the government reduced the benefits available to those people from $2 million to $1 million to rehab themselves and to get the attendant care they need. And they also made it much more difficult for people to get into that, what we call catastrophic category, to be able to access those benefits for themselves.
Yeah, I understand they changed the definition
Yes.
of injuries that qualify for the highest level of benefits.
They did. And the victims that were affected the most are those that have severe traumatic brain injuries. Generally speaking, they used what's called the GCS, or the Glasgow Coma Scale, to determine whether or not someone would be deemed catastrophically impaired, and they've taken that away. And so someone that could be in a coma for an entire month, and that is absolute evidence from a trauma perspective and a medical perspective, they've suffered a severe brain injury. No longer is that the test for them to access those $1 million in benefits.
So what was the purpose of this change in legislation?
Well, it's interesting. The name of the bill was Fighting Fraud and Trying to Reduce Auto Insurance Premiums to Ontarians. And so the focus of that bill was to say if we reduce the amount available to these 1% of claimants, then we're going to reach our overall goal, which is trying to reduce auto rates for Ontarians. And a year later, we know the statistics, that hasn't happened at all.
The rates are not any lower?
They're not any lower. In fact, an article just came out a couple months ago that said the rates have increased for auto insurance in Ontario. They are still the highest across the country. And in Ontario, on average, people are paying $1,500 a year versus the average, so that's in Ontario. So the average, what people pay across Canada, is about $930. So it's 55% higher still in Ontario a year later, yet the amount of benefits available to those people are cut in half.
And also the whole myth about reducing fraud. You don't go into a coma to reduce fraud. I mean, fraud is when people claim that they had their car stolen and they had somebody steal it for them, or it's not this kind of thing, is it?
Absolutely not. And that was what we advocated at the outset when we heard about these changes is, yes, there is potential fraud, but those are people that perhaps are alleging to be in an auto accident. These are not the people that are in comas for 30 days at trauma hospitals that need these benefits, especially in the first 2 years, to try and rehabilitate themselves so they get back to work and they're not dependent on the social system. So they're using their auto insurance benefits to rehab themselves, not OHIP benefits. It is such an economic advantage to have these benefits available to those people. It is not these people that are creating fraud within the system.
Well, there's one story, one crash that happened that really summed this up, and that was what happened to Adam Barry.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you don't know that story, the auto insurance rule change took effect 12 hours after this man's accident. He was in a coma for a month after a motorcycle crash. He suffered major injuries, including brain trauma, multiple broken bones in his arm, leg, and hand, as well as internal organ damage. If the crash had happened 12 hours earlier, he'd been eligible for up to about $2 million, right?
That's correct.
In compensation. Instead, he received $86,000.
Total.
He was mistakenly pronounced dead. I mean, there was no way that this man wasn't critically injured.
Absolutely. And the rehab that this man needed far exceeded $86,000. And he was married. He had twins. He could no longer return to work because his wife became the main caregiver. She couldn't return to full-time work. She was down to working once a week. And so $86,000 is what he had to try and rehab himself. The only thing that was saving this family from claiming bankruptcy was they had bought mortgage insurance. But the ironic thing is they had bought auto insurance. They had bought auto insurance for this exact situation, that if he was in the 1%, it was there to help give him the income, for them to hire an attendant so that his wife could continue to work, and for him to have the rehab benefits because he wants to get back to work. He wants to continue to provide for his family, and that's good for his family, and that's good for Ontario, and that's good for the economy. But yes, he went down to $86,000 because his accident happened 12 hours after these changes.
Is there any recourse for people? Because this seems so unfair.
Well, for people individually, like I emphasized last year, is absolutely you can buy up on these benefits and get them back to where they would have been before the June 1st changes. So you can, and I do, make sure that I talk to my insurance broker about how much do I have in medical rehabilitation benefits if I'm seriously injured, or in attendant care benefits, or even income replacement benefits. If you don't have an LTD policy, you can buy up higher for your income replacement benefits. But there is significant lobbying now being done. There's greater awareness that a year after these accidents, that treatment and getting treatment to people with these severe injuries is the most important, not cutting benefits. And perhaps the way that this was gone about a year ago isn't the way to, number one, reduce Ontario insurance rates, but also help the people that need it the most. And I'm really interested to see if they actually appoint someone that has an arm's length relationship from the Insurance Bureau of Canada to start advising the government of how do we get these insurance rates down for Ontario? We need them down without hurting the people that need the benefits the most.
Well, how are injured claimants doing overall? Do we know? Do we have any idea?
In terms of this 1%, we represent a lot of clients that are catastrophically injured. Adam's story is so familiar. And they are at the point that they are living off of so little money. And mentally, they're suffering tremendously because they're not able to rehab themselves and they don't have any access to funds to do that. And so I think if we look at it long term, we're going to see an actual decline in how these people are recovering and returning back to work. But I think that's something long term that we're going to have to look at to see that. In terms of right now, all we know is that people are continuing to get injured in accidents. The benefits aren't there to cover them. Insurance companies are not giving advancements on lawsuits. And now we know 2 months ago when they let us know in terms of insurance rates that they're continuing to rise. So overall, the system continues to be broken.
Well, if the system is broken and something happens like an Adam Barry story, are personal injury lawyers able to fight the insurance companies on some of that?
Not on the accident benefits, and that's what we've been talking about, these benefits that are entitled to right away. We can't. The legislation is very clear. This is all you are getting. And we know from a medical perspective that the maximum amount of recovery and the best time for recovery is done in the first 2 years. So what we've even tried as personal injury lawyers, if we're suing, say, the driver in the case of Adam Barry that was charged with careless driving, was at fault for this accident, approaching his lawyer and say, yes, we have a lawsuit, and that might not conclude for another 3 to 4 years. Will you give an advancement? Every single time I've asked for an advancement from an insurance company in the past year, the answer's been no, or they've gone silent. They're not required to, and they're not giving the advance funds for these people to recover. So yes, we can advocate for them, but we don't have any teeth in a law to turn around and say you should give this advancement because your client is at fault for this accident. So in both cases, as much as personal injury lawyers have the power to sue, and we will get recoveries for you, we need more laws to help these people in those first 2 years get access to those funds.
So bottom line, what is it that you suggest our listeners do to check their insurance policy?
Absolutely the same thing as last year. You need, when you're at, now the awareness is out there, I believe, more than it was when the changes first came about. So I would say to listeners, when you're looking at renewal of your insurance, ask your insurance broker, how much is it that for me, if I can buy up on some of these benefits? Here's what I have at work, so I don't need this aspect of disability, but here's what I don't have. And you can even buy up on individual categories. It doesn't have to be all of the same categories, and you'd be very, very surprised how minimal it costs for you to buy up. Alison,
where can our listeners connect with you if they need some help?
Absolutely. the web is probably the best at McLeishorlando.com, and my link there under Alison Burrison. You can send an email or call and inquire whatever you can about the situation you're going through, and we'll get back to you. We give free consultations as well to clients.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
This is What She Said. Stay with us.